so I can get on camera, he says. It's nice to be here, and I'm just going to talk briefly because I want to talk to you as people, as Mary has said, we're counting on for the future. I wrote a book this last year with Dr. Charles A. Crenshaw. You may or may not have heard of it, but I hope you have. The way it was brought out, the format that was used, the way it was publicized was by design and not by accident. We had some luck along the way. In that Oliver Stone's little movie just happened to come out and cause a great deal of controversy and publicity. But we thought, when we wrote the book, that the doctor had a story, very truthful, and account of what happened November 22nd, 23rd, and 24th, 1963. When he first approached me, I said, "Doc, well, write and tell the truth." And he said, "I want to." And I said, "But I want to warn you, when you do, you're going to lose some so-called friends, and you will be attacked." He said, "Oh, okay, I'm sure that'll happen." But not really believing that it would. We decided to put the book out in a little paperback, basically for several reasons. One, everybody has $5. Number two, there's dozens of good, meticulously footnoted, documented, well-documented books dealing on all the facts on the Kennedy assassination. If you want to do research, those are the books to go to. We felt it was a time that the American people, as a whole, hundreds of thousands and millions of them, ought to be able to pick up something that told the truth about those 3 days. And so it was very successful. So much so that you got Dr. Crenshaw on 20/20 television, which, I don't know whether you know it or not, goes into about 19 million homes. That's a pretty good PR work. He did. The book went immediately to the New York Times bestseller list and has done quite well. We was pleased. Some were not. We found out pretty quick. Because I want to talk to you about the counterattack on this man right here. And it was violent, brutal, anything that you want to term it. They call this man a liar for having told the truth about what he saw and heard on those days so long ago. The counterattack was not without plan or design, and that's really what I want to stress to you. Because it seems that immediately, when Oliver Stone announced that he was making a movie on the assassination and that he was using Jim Garrison as a key in it, before the script was written, before a piece of film had gone into the camera, there was attacks from him from all across this country, from the Washington Post to the New York Times to the LA Times to you name it, saying that the movie that he was going to make would be a lie, would be deceitful, it would deceive the American public, it would not be anywhere near the truth, and so forth. They did the same thing to this man, and I was with him when those attacks came, and for about 2 or 3 weeks it looked like he just lost his best friend, because you see, some of the very doctors that he served his medical residency with, their department attacked him. Called him a liar. Said that he was doing this for money. And why am I saying all this? I'm saying it because the counterattack really started back in 1966, when the first critical books came out on this subject. And a CIA document was circulated around this globe to various CIA stations, which was how to combat the criticism on the Warren Report. One of the first things that they say, they never once mention refute the facts. Never once address the issue of who could be right and who could be wrong. What did they do? Attacked the messenger. They can't confront the message, attack the messenger. Say that they are financially interested. Say they're crazy. Give any kind of motive, but attack the messenger. And that's what they did to this doctor here. Well, the newspaper articles and the news media and so forth picked up the story, and immediately he was accused of things like peddling lies, defamer of truth. Everything that you could think of was said about this particular little book. It was a counterattack, and it was all out. The biggie, though, came when they had a press conference and announced that the very powerful and prestigious Journal of the American Medical Society had suddenly chosen to use their format and their prestige to publish a refuting what this doctor said about the number and the direction of the gunshots and what the president really looked like when he was brought in. He was in shock when that happened. You could understand that. But I went back to the CIA memo and I showed him, Doc, one of the first things they said to do to these CIA agents around the world is to go to media assets, especially editors, and give them stories and urge them to print stories that refute and would combat what any critic of the official version had to say. Do you think that's by accident or by design? And they always do it with misinformation and by attacking the messenger, never able to refute what the man has said in this whole book. Two things they said. One is that he was lying when he said that the shots came from the front. Even some of the doctors at Parkland Hospital said it's not true. Well, you go back to the sworn testimony under oath of the doctors who called him a liar, and you find out, without exception, the shot that hit the president in the throat was a wound of entrance. The shot that hit the president in the head flew out the back of his head. In other words, they agreed with Dr. Crenshaw, and yet they turned right around and attacked him. What's the reason for that? It was very puzzling and very hurtful to him. The second thing they accused him of lying about was that he was at Parkland Hospital attending Lee Harvey Oswald for his wounds on November the 24th, when someone tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Could you take a phone call?" He took the phone call, and a big booming voice on the line says, "This is President Lyndon Johnson. How is the accused assassin doing?" And he says, of course, well, he's holding his own, but paraphrasing. And he says, well, there is someone present in the operating room who will take a deathbed confession from Oswald. Well, sure enough, Doc had noticed a man in there already in a scrub suit, knew he was not hospital personnel or a doctor. Said the man looked like Oliver Hardy to him because he was such a big man. He had on an ill-fitting scrub suit and had a badge and had a gun dangling out of his pocket. Well, they said this didn't happen. This was all a lie. I wasn't ready for that. I mean, I believed Dr. Crenshaw, and I knew that there were phone calls to various people in Dallas, like Captain Will Fritz and others from Lyndon Johnson, that he did take an active role. And so I could see no reason at all for Dr. Crenshaw to lie, but I had no backup for that. Well, I want you to know that since the story broke and since he was attacked, at least 3 people have came forward and said, in fact, one was the switchboard operator at Parkland Hospital, and she said, yes, there was a phone call. Yes, the man in a loud booming voice said, this is President Johnson, connect me to the operating room, and who was I refused to connect Lyndon Johnson wherever he wanted to be connected. And so she called the operating room. Dr. Crenshaw was the only one whose hands were free at the time. And so that did happen. All I'm trying to do, and I'm going to be very brief about this, is that when you see the media attack a critic and attack the messenger, pay absolutely no attention to it. Go ahead and look at the background of this. Find out what the real truth is, and call their handler. This lady that ran the switchboard at Parkland Hospital immediately wrote a letter to the Dallas Morning News and said, "I'm tired of you bashing Dr. Crenshaw. I've known him for years. He's not a liar. I took the call." Dr. Philip Williams came forward and said, "Man, we've talked about that for 30 years. The call did take place." So there's confirmation of all of that. What did the Dallas Morning News, who accused Dr. Crenshaw of peddling lies, and on that specific point, what do you think? Did they put her letter confirming the phone call? She just a little standard postcard back saying thank you for that. We've chosen not to print your letter at this time. So misinformation is one thing. Y'all know the difference between misinformation and disinformation. Misinformation is what I do occasionally. I make a mistake and I print something that's wrong. Disinformation is when you knowingly print a falsehood in order to carry a subject matter off in another direction. They're experts at it. So you folks are going out, you're in law, perhaps all of you, I'm assuming something here. When they do this, call their handler. If they can't prove that they're calling someone a liar when they make an allegation, ignore it and then call their handler and expose it. That's the only way we're going to be able to finally get to the complete truth about that. Dr. Crenshaw is now fighting mad, and he's come back strong, and you'll be hearing more from him in the future. I was going to give you a lot more of an update on this, but I know y'all are probably tired of hearing all this. Y'all been here for a while. Oh yeah, that's good. She reminded me to tell you about the document that was found, which the FBI immediately, and I suppose because Lyndon Johnson had already made a phone call, or made a statement, we've got to get involved after Oswald was shot by Ruger. Phone call was made, said get some people down there in the operating room, get some FBI agents down in the operating room, and get a deathbed confession from Oswald. In fact, I learned this, I may not have told you about this, but Dr. Jenkins, who was also one of the Parkland Hospital doctors, who attacked Dr. Crenshaw for his book and his story, had already said in 1988, and it's on Nigel Turner's film, The Men Who Killed Kennedy, he said there were several men, he called them Secret Service, he didn't know, in scrub suits, in the operating room with Oswald, and they had not given Oswald any anesthesia, and so he was not under that influence. And they were bending over, shouting in his ear, "Did you do it? Did you do it?" So, I don't know if it was Lyndon Johnson who made the phone call. I do know that there were men in that room who received a death confession, and the orders came from the White House. I might point this out, there were several calls that came to Dallas, not only to Parkland Hospital, but to Captain Will Fritz. One came from Cliff Carter, I know, who was Johnson's aide, and he even told him how to write up the indictment on Lee Harvey Oswald. Now you figure that one out. What's the White House doing getting involved in a Texas indictment? But I might point out to you, Cliff Carter, this aide to LBJ, is the one that picked up John Connolly's clothes from Henry Gonzalez and they suddenly became blonde before they were turned over as evidence. I don't know what all was going on. I know that this man right here told the truth as best he could, and he was attacked personally and viciously for it, and the counterattack against him is now going to have a counterattack. So y'all be ready for that. Thank you.